Khandanakhandakhadya. Khandanakhandakhadya. There is a text that has survived in Indian philosophy without ever being refuted. It was attributed to a scholar named Sri Harsha, and it belongs to the 12th century, though we should be honest. The dating of its earliest manuscripts is a matter of ongoing scholarly debate, and we know almost nothing certain about the man who wrote it. What we do know is the world it entered. Medieval Indian philosophy had built, in the Nyaya school of logical realism, one of the most rigorous epistemological systems ever constructed. Every claim required proof. Every proof required valid inference. Every inference required reliable perception. The system was elegant, internally consistent, and widely accepted as the architecture of how human beings can know anything at all. Sri Harsha's response was not to build a better system. It was to pour acid on the foundations of system building itself, and to do so using the very tools of logic the Nyayikas had perfected. The text he left behind is called the Khandanakhandakhadya. It means, roughly, the sweetmeat consisting of pieces of refutation, the delight that feeds on the devouring of arguments. What follows is that text. The invocation and the strategy. I bow to that light, the shoreless, unconditioned mass of awareness. It is the one that remains when the net of words is shredded. It is the truth that the mind tries to capture in a definition, only to find its own hands empty. The skeptic asks, why is this book called a sweetmeat? Is logic not a dry and bitter bone? Sri Harsha's answer is this. In this inquiry, refutation is not a chore, it is a delight. To watch a rigid and arrogant definition dissolve into a vacuum is the highest pleasure of the intellect. The text is a sweetmeat because it feeds the seeker's hunger for freedom by systematically breaking the teeth of the ego's logical traps. We do not eat the world. We eat the apparent clarity of the world's definitions. The logician demands, if you say my definitions are wrong, you must provide your own. What is your proof for the one? The reply is surgical. I have no position to defend. I do not need to prove that the sun exists. Its light is self-evident. I only need to prove that your cage, the system of definitions you use to obscure the sun, is built of air and contradictions. This is the strategy of Vedanta, of refutation without counterthesis. The Advaitin is not a builder. He is a demolition expert. If I can prove that your concepts of causality, perception, and difference cannot survive 5 seconds of scrutiny, then your real world collapses. And when two-ness is proven to be a logical impossibility, oneness remains by default. The logician believes the world is knowable and definable. He believes that if you can name a thing, you have captured it. Sri Harsha identifies this will to define as a kind of hubris. Definitions are the walls of a prison. We think we are safe because we have labeled the stone and the fire, but the labels are circular. The acid of logic will now be poured onto every category of the world: substance, quality, relation, and difference, until the mind realizes it has been living in a mirage of language. The mirage of definition. The logician stands confident. He says, the world is real because it is definable. If I can define a jar, distinguishing it from everything that is not a jar, then the jar is a fixed and objective fact. Definition is the light that reveals the boundaries of existence. The response, You are mistaking the label for the life. You believe that by placing a fence of words around a perception, you have secured its reality. We will now test the fence. For a definition to be valid, it must escape 3 specific logical infections. It must not be too wide, capturing things it was not meant to capture. It must not be too narrow, failing to capture the very thing it was meant to define. And it must not describe something that cannot exist. These 3 are not merely errors to be avoided. They are the inherent nature of language. Every time you tighten the fence to avoid the first infection, you fall into the second. The mind oscillates endlessly between a definition that includes too much and a definition that excludes the object itself. The logician attempts to define reality as that which possesses a definition. What is a definition? It is that which defines reality. What is reality? It is that which is defined by a definition. This is circularity. It is a thought loop that never touches the ground. You are trying to support one thing with a second, and the second with the first. It is like a man trying to cross a river by sitting in a basket and lifting the handles. Suppose the logician says, I will provide a second definition to clarify the first. If the first definition needs a second to be clear, the second needs a third, and the third a fourth. This is infinite regress. Your logic has become a runaway engine secreting a never-ending chain of words that never reaches the actual thing. If you require an infinite number of steps to know a single jar, you can never know the jar. The acid has done its work here. A thing that cannot be defined without falling into circularity or infinite regress is indescribable. The jar exists as a vivid experience, but it refuses to be captured by the intellect's cage. The logician is a man trying to sketch a waterfall with a ruler. The Advaitin is the one who puts down the ruler and feels the spray. The execution of right knowledge. The logician declares, the world is real because I have right knowledge of it. I can distinguish water from mirage. Right knowledge is an apprehension that corresponds exactly to the object as it is. Because I possess the truth, I am not a dreamer. We now analyze the term prama, valid knowledge. If your definition of right is hollow, then your knowledge is just a high-frequency hallucination that has not yet been interrupted. The logician defines truth as an apprehension which represents the object as it actually is. What does as it actually is mean? If it means the totality of the object, then no human knowledge is true, for we never see all sides, all atoms, and all history of a single grain of sand at once. If it means only some qualities, then a mistaken perception of a snake in a rope is also true, for the snake and the rope share the quality of length. Correspondence is a ghost word. It sounds solid, but when you try to pin it to a coordinate, it vanishes. You cannot compare your thought to the object to see if they match, because you only ever have access to the thought. You are a prisoner trying to verify whether a portrait resembles a man he has never seen outside the frame. Suppose the logician tries a different path. Right knowledge is that which is not shaken by doubt and is never contradicted. Consider a man who sees a mirage and dies of thirst before he ever reaches the sand. To him, the water was never contradicted. Does that make it truth? Or consider a dream that lasts 100 years. As long as the sleeper does not wake, his knowledge is uncontradicted. Not being contradicted is a property of time, not a property of truth. It is merely a failure to find the error yet. And how do you know that your right knowledge is actually right? You say, because it was produced by a flawless instrument. How do you know the instrument is flawless? Because it produced right knowledge. To know the truth, you need a tool. To verify the tool, you need the truth. If every piece of valid knowledge requires a second piece of valid knowledge to certify it, your mind is forced into infinite regress. You are waiting for a certificate that can never be issued. If knowing is indefinable, then the known is a mystery. The logician is a man trying to lock a door that has no walls. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that the door and the lock are made of the same indescribable substance as the supposed thief. Only the luminous awareness remains, witnessing the collapse of the definitions. The blindness of perception. The logician stands at the ramparts and declares, "You may dissolve knowing in the abstract, but you cannot deny what stands before your eyes." Perception is the king of all instruments. It is knowledge produced by the direct contact of the senses with the object. This contact is the hard proof that the world is not a dream. We now analyze the surgical nature of touching. If you cannot define the contact, your perception is blind. If you cannot define the object, your perception is empty. The logician defines perception as knowledge born from the contact of the sense organ with the object. What is this contact? Is it a physical joining? If the eye must touch the sun to see it, the eye would be incinerated instantly. If it does not touch it, there is no contact. Does the eye touch the surface of the jar or the whole jar? If it touches only the surface, you have not perceived the jar but only a skin. If it touches the whole, the eye must be inside the atoms of the clay. Contact is a ghost word used to hide a gap in understanding. You cannot explain how a biological organ interacts with a material substance without falling into a logical vacuum. The logician argues, "I see the jar as a whole solid unit. A jar is a collection of parts, the neck, the belly, the base. When you look at the jar, do you see the front? Yes. Do you see the back? No. Do you see the inside? No. You only ever perceive a fragment, a sliver of color and shape. The whole jar is a superimposition. Your mind invents the jar to stitch the fragments together. Perception, which promised to show you the thing as it is revealed to be a creative fiction. You are seeing a patch of light and calling it a world." How do we know the eye is the cause of sight? The logician says, because when the eye is open, there is sight. When it is closed, there is darkness. This is a correlation error. A shadow follows a man, but the shadow is not the cause of the man. By this logic, the light in the room is the perception, or the space is the perception. The senses are biological conditions, not logical proofs. The scene has been executed. The logician is a man trying to weigh a mountain using a scale made of clouds. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that seeing is not a contact with another, but the light of awareness illuminating its own indescribable projections. Only the inner sun remains, witnessing the blindness of the eyes. The collapse of the inference engine. The logician stands amidst the ruins of his senses and clings to his last weapon. You may have blinded my eyes, but you cannot stop my mind. Inference is the light that reaches where the eye cannot. When I see smoke, I know there is fire, even if the mountain is made of iron. This universal law is the unbreakable steel that holds the world together. Inference depends entirely on the universal connection, the vyapti. If the connection is a ghost, the inference is a lie. The logician defines inference as knowledge produced by the realization of an invariable relation between a mark, smoke, and a fact, fire. How do you know this relation is invariable? Have you seen every fire in the universe? No, you have seen a few fires in a few kitchens. Have you seen every instance of smoke in the future? Number does not seeing a counterexample prove a law? No, a man who has never seen a white crow cannot claim that all crows are black as an absolute truth. He can only claim a failure to find a white one yet. Your universal law is a biological assumption. You have taken a handful of experiences and stretched them across the infinite. Logic requires certainty, not a high-frequency guess. Vyapti is a bridge made of air. The logician argues, smoke is the clue because it is pervaded by fire. What is pervasion? It is the state of never being without the other. How do you know they are never without each other? Because there is a pervasion between them. You are defining the law by the connection and the connection by the law. Your reason is a snake eating its own tail. If the clue cannot define its own authority, then the fire it points to remains a spectral hypothesis. And how do you know the smoke is actually on the hill? Because I see it there. We have already proven that seeing is a creative fiction. If the hill is an undefinable mental stitching and the smoke is an assumption, then your syllogism is a shadow touching a ghost. You are trying to prove an unseen fire on an unproven hill using an unvalidated connection. Universality is a psychological habit, not a logical fact. Pervasion is a circular trap. The conclusion is a leap into a vacuum. The logician is a man trying to navigate a forest using a map he drew while he was fast asleep. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that the fire and the smoke are both ripples in the indescribable flow. Reason has committed suicide. Only the silent awareness remains, witnessing the collapse of the why. The murder of difference. The logician stands amidst the ruins of his logic and clings to the evidence of his eyes. You may dissolve my definitions, but you cannot dissolve the distance between things. I see the jar and I see the cloth. They are separate. They occupy different spaces. This difference is the bedrock of the real world. Without it, there is only chaos. Therefore, duality is a fact. You assume the wall exists because you have stopped looking at the bricks. What is this difference? If it cannot be found under the microscope, then your many is merely a visual stutter. The logician argues, difference is the very nature of the thing. To see the jar is to see difference from the cloth. If difference is the nature of the jar, then when you look at a jar, must you not simultaneously know everything in the universe that is not a jar? To know that it is different from B, you must know B. If the difference is the very essence of A, then A cannot be known until B is known. This would mean that a simple perception of a pot requires omniscience. Since you claim to know the pot without knowing the entire universe, difference cannot be its nature. The logician tries a second path. Difference is a quality that sits on top of the object, like color. You say the jar possesses difference. Is this difference itself different from the jar? If it is the same as the jar, we return to the first failure. If it is different, you need a second difference to separate the first difference from the jar. Then you will need a third difference to separate the second from the first. This is infinite regress. Your logic has become a runaway engine, secreting a million ghostly differences, just to keep one jar separate from one cloth. The logician retreats to his final definition. Difference is simply mutual absence. The jar is the absence of the cloth, and the cloth is the absence of the jar. To define the jar, you use the absence of the cloth. To define the cloth, you use the absence of the jar. You are trying to build two towers by leaning them against each other in midair. If you do not know the jar independently, you cannot know its absence. If you use the absence to define the jar, you have explained nothing. The other has been executed. The logician is a man who draws a line in the ocean and then wonders why the water on the left does not stay separate from the water on the right. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that the line is a mental projection. There is no jar and no cloth in the absolute. There is only the unfragmented mass of being. The wall was made of words, and the acid has returned it to silence. The vacuity of relations. The logician stands amidst the wreckage of his categories and attempts a final repair. You may have dissolved the boundaries, but you cannot deny the connections. I see the jar sitting on the ground. They are connected by contact. I see the blue color in the jar. They are connected by inherence. These relations are the steel rivets that hold the many parts of the world into a single functioning machine. Without relations, the universe would fall apart. You assume that because two things appear together, there is a third thing holding them. What is this relation? If the glue cannot stick to the parts, then your machine is a hallucination of order. The logician defines contact as a quality that exists in two substances that were previously separate. Where exactly does this contact live? Does it pervade the whole object? If the contact between the jar and the ground pervades the entire jar, then the top of the jar, which is in the air, must also be touching the ground. Does it exist only in a part? If it touches only the bottom of the jar, you need a second relation to connect the contact to the rest of the jar. To connect A to B, you invent a contact C, but now you must explain how C connects to A, and how C connects to B. You will need a million other ghostly connectors. If you require an infinite chain of relations to explain a single handshake, then no two things in the universe have ever truly touched. The logician retreats to a subtler glue. Inherence is an eternal relation that binds a quality to a substance, like blueness to a jar. They are inseparable. A relation, by definition, must stand between two things. Is this inherence itself related to the jar? If it is not related, it cannot bind. If it is related, you need a second inherence to bind the first. You are trying to fix a broken chain by adding more broken links. Inherence is a linguistic label you use to hide the fact that you cannot explain how a quality and a substance can be two things and one thing at the same time. How can one thing belong to another? The logician says, the fruit is in the basket. The inness is the relation. If the inness is different from the fruit and the basket, then it is just a third object floating in the void between them. If it is the same as the objects, then there is no relation, only the objects. There is no glue in the atoms of the world. There are only perceptions that follow one another in a specific sequence. The order you see is a habit of your own mind, not a physical property of the world. The bond has been executed. The logician is a man trying to tie two clouds together with a rope made of smoke. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that things do not need to be connected because they were never truly separate. The relation was only needed because you believed in difference. When the two is gone, the glue is no longer required. The universe is not a machine of parts. It is the unbroken mass of being. The phantom of substance. The logician stands amidst the unconnected data flashes of his world and attempts a desperate reconstruction. You may have dissolved the glue, but the bricks remain. I see a substance, this jar. It is a solid foundation that possesses qualities like blue, round, and heavy. The qualities change, but the substance stays. This holder of properties is the undeniable anchor of reality. You assume that because you have a noun and an adjective, there are two distinct things in the world. What is this substance apart from its qualities? If you cannot find the holder without the held, then your object is a phantom created by your own grammar. The logician defines substance as that which is the substrate of qualities. What is a quality? It is that which resides in a substance. What is a substance? It is that which is the residence of qualities. You are defining the room by the furniture and the furniture by the room. Your logic is a closed loop that never touches a real entity. The logician argues, I can perceive the difference. The blue is the color and the jar is the thing that has the color. Take a blue jar, mentally strip away the color, strip away the shape, strip away the weight, strip away the texture. What is left? The logician says, the substance remains, show it to me. If the substance has no color, no shape, no weight, and no texture, it is unperceivable. A thing that cannot be seen, touched, or thought of is indistinguishable from nothingness. The substance is merely a mental stitching invented to hold a bundle of qualities together. The pot is a ghost. Only the blue was ever there. Suppose the logician says, substance is defined by the quality of substanceness. If substance-ness is a quality that defines the substance, is this quality different from the substance? If it is the same, you have defined nothing. If it is different, you need a relation to connect them, and we have already dissolved relations. Does substance-ness itself possess qualities? If so, you need qualityness to define the quality. Your intellect is secreting a never-ending chain of abstract labels, just to explain a simple rock. The object has been executed. The logician is a man trying to peel an onion to find the onion substance at the center, only to find that when the layers are gone, the onion has vanished. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that the layers and the empty center are both made of the same indescribable light. The jar is not blue. There is only a blue awareness. The two, substance plus quality, has died. Only the unfragmented seer remains, witnessing the collapse of the things. The prison of time and space. The logician stands in the wreckage of his objects and clings to the last remaining structure. You may have dissolved the things, but you cannot deny the container. The world happens in time and space. Events have a before and an after. Objects have a here and a there. These coordinates are the absolute framework of existence. Without them, there is only chaos. Therefore, time and space are real substances. You assume that because you perceive a sequence, there is a clock in the stars. What are these coordinates apart from your own thoughts? If now and here cannot survive the acid, then your prison has no walls. The logician defines time as the cause of the notions of before and after. What is this now that separates the past from the future? Is it a point? If it is a point with no duration, it is a mathematical ghost. It has no width to hold an experience. Is it a duration? If the now has width, then it must have a beginning and an end. This means the now contains its own before and after. To define the past, you need the present. To define the present, you need the past. Time is not a substance. It is a relationship between two mental flashes. You cannot find a second of time in the physical world. You only find a change in a thought. Your time is merely the speed of your own delusion. The logician argues, space is that which allows things to be separate and provides direction. You say the mountain is to the east. East of what? East of me. You move 10 miles to the east. Now the mountain is to your west. East and west and up and down are not properties of the universe. They are egocentric projections. Space has no north until a mind draws a line. If the coordinates depend entirely on the position of the eye, then space is not an independent substance. It is a geography of the ego. The distance between you and the stars is a mental measurement, not a physical distance. Suppose the logician says, space is a thing that supports other things. Where does space live? If space lives in something else, you need a second space to hold the first. If space lives in itself, you are back to circular logic. If space is everywhere, then it has no location, and a thing without location is indistinguishable from non-existence. You are trying to explain where by inventing awareness that itself has no where. The prison has been executed. The logician is a man who draws a cell on a piece of paper and then cries because he is trapped inside the lines. The Advaitin is the one who realizes that the past and the future are ripples in the eternal now. The here and the there are glints in the infinite presence. The walls of time and space were made of definitions, and the acid has returned them to the indescribable flow. You are the timeless, spaceless witness. The prison has turned into the sun. The architecture of the indescribable. The logician, standing in the wreckage of his categories, attempts a final stand. You have destroyed my definitions of objects, relations, and time, but logic demands a choice. A thing must either be real or unreal. There is no middle ground. If the world is not absolutely real, it must be a total non-entity like a square circle. Since it is not a non-entity, it must be real. Your indescribable is a logical cowardice. You are a prisoner of the law of the excluded middle. You believe that if a door is not open, it must be closed. But we have discovered a third state, the mirage. The logician defines the real as that which is never negated. Is the world real by this definition? Knowledge of the self negates the world. Therefore the world is not absolutely real. If you claim it is real now even though it will be negated later, you have admitted that its reality is temporary. A temporary reality is a contradiction in terms. The world fails the test of the real. It has a beginning in misidentification and an end in knowledge. It is a stolen moment in the infinite. The logician defines the unreal as that which never appears in any cognition, like the horns of a rabbit. Is the world unreal? The world is seen, felt, and tasted. It produces physiological reactions, fear of the snake, joy of the feast. A total nothing cannot produce a something. You cannot call a mountain unreal in the same way you call a square circle unreal, for the mountain strikes you if you walk into it. The world possesses apparent presence. If the world is not real and not unreal, what is it? It is indescribable. Indescribability is not a lack of information. It is the positive logical status of an appearance that appears, negating total unreality, and is cancelled, negating total reality. The world is like a dream wound. While you are dreaming, the wound bleeds and hurts and you seek a doctor. Is the wound real? No, you wake and your skin is whole. Is the wound unreal? No, for while you slept it caused you real agony. The wound is indescribable. It is a luminous blur that performs a function without possessing a substance. The world has been executed as a category, only to be reborn as a mystery. The logician is a man trying to categorize the colors of a bubble that pops the moment he touches it. The Advaitin is the one who enjoys the shimmer of the bubble, knowing that its being and its vanishing are the same event. The quest for a solid definition has ended in the silence of the indescribable. The sovereign skeptic. The logician, standing in the ruins of his definitions, finds one last weapon. He turns the acid back on the chemist. You are a hypocrite. You use logic to prove that logic is impossible. You use words to prove that words mean nothing. If every definition is a circular trap or an infinite regress, then your refutation is also a trap. If your logic is true, it refutes itself. If it is false, we can ignore it. Either way, the fortress of logic stands. You are trying to trap the wind in a net. We do not claim that our logic is absolutely real. We use logic as a surgical instrument, not as a piece of the body. The Vedanta move, the refutation without a counter-thesis, is not a coward's evasion. It is a precise technical choice. The Nyayikas themselves distinguished between Vada, honest dialectic aimed at truth, Jalpa, debate aimed at winning, and Vedanta, the sustained critique that holds no thesis of its own. Sri Harsha claims this third mode deliberately. I have no thesis to overthrow, he says in effect. You cannot defeat a man who is sitting quietly on the ground by knocking him down. You can only refute a position. If I hold none, your refutation has nothing to grip. The skeptic objects, but if you use logic, you are implicitly committing to logic's validity. The answer is that logic here is not being claimed as a window into absolute truth. It is being used as a mirror that the opponent must accept, since he himself laid it down. Every move made is inside the Nyayika's own rules, inside his own definitions, inside his own accepted standards of what counts as a flaw. The rules of the game are the opponent's rules. The game is played on the opponent's table. The Advaitin has merely sat down, accepted the invitation, and shown that by those very rules, on that very table, the pieces refuse to stay where the logician places them. Reason has committed suicide. The intellect has realized that its job is to clear the path, not to be the destination. The logician is a man who refuses to cross a bridge because he is not sure if the bridge is absolutely real. The Advaitin is the one who crosses the bridge and then watches it wash away in the flood, knowing he no longer needs to go back. The silence of the infinite. The tournament of the mind is over. We stand on the ramparts of the world and look at the wreckage. Definitions have been revealed as circular traps. Perception has been blinded by its own mechanics. Inference has collapsed into a lack of universal certainty. Difference has been murdered as a logical impossibility. Time and space have vanished as mental coordinates. The logician's world is now a field of ash. The acid has been so effective that even the concepts of argument and refutation have dissolved. The skeptic asks, if everything has been dissolved, what is left? Is this not the victory of the void? No, the acid can only dissolve that which is definable and limited. It cannot dissolve the awareness that witnessed the entire demolition. Every act of negation requires a substrate. When you say this is not a snake, the knot depends on the rope. When we say the world is not real, not unreal, and not definable, the very capacity to say not depends on the existence of the negator. This negator is the residue. It is the only thing in the universe that does not need a definition to be true. It is the indisputable fact of being. The purpose of the refutation was not to describe Brahman, but to clear the view. A man who has spent years believing himself to be a reflection in a pond need not be told anything new about his true nature. He only needs to stop staring at the water. The demolition of definitions is not the construction of a new cage. It is the removal of the old one. What remains when the cage is gone does not need to be named. It is already the case. It was always already the case. The silence that remains is not the silence of a grave. It is the silence of a man who has finally stopped arguing with his own shadow. Brahman is now defined by the only category that survived the acid bath, non-sublatability. Every other thing was negated by logic. Every other thing was reduced to something else. But the light of awareness was the one doing the negating. The intellect has committed suicide, but the witness has achieved sovereignty. Reality is revealed as a solid mass of awareness. It is not a theory that can be refuted by a smarter logician. It is the substance of logic itself. The sweetmeat of refutation has been eaten to its last crumb. It was sweet because it fed the hunger for freedom. It was made of bits because duality can only be killed in pieces. Duality is a failure of logic. Indescribability is the status of the world. Awareness is the only residue. The acid is spent. The two has been logically executed. The one remains, shoreless, unconditioned, and perfectly silent. Silence is the final roar of the king. Here ends the Khandanakhandakhadya, the sweetmeat of refutation.